50 years ago this month, the world watched in amazement and awe as American astronaut Neil Armstrong became the first human to walk on the surface of the moon. Good Sunday morning, everyone. Today on Perspectives, we are celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Apollo 11 moon landing. On July 20th, 1969, that event became the benchmark for man's ability to explore worlds other than our own. And on that date, NASA officials say that Armstrong and fellow astronaut Buzz Aldrin spent almost 2.5 hours on the moon collecting moon rocks and planting the American flag onto the lunar surface. The third member of that Apollo mission, astronaut Michael Collins, circled the moon, preparing for their eventual return to Earth. The Apollo 11 mission fulfilled President John F. Kennedy's goal for America set 8 years earlier to land a man on the moon and return him safely to Earth. In 2008, Neil Armstrong gave a speech at the celebration of the 50th anniversary of the creation of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA. And during that speech, the retired astronaut applauded the space agency's ability to inspire Americans.
I submit that one of the most important roles of government is to inspire and motivate its citizens, and particularly its young citizens, to love to learn, to strive to participate in and contribute to societal progress. And by that measure, NASA will, without doubt, rank in the top tier of government enterprises.
And the work continues as more missions to the moon are in progress, with a lot of that work taking place at the Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama. Here today to talk about Alabama's contribution to space exploration is Dr. Carlos Montalvo of the University of South Alabama. Dr. Montalvo is the director of the South Aerospace Systems and Technology Lab. Dr. Montalvo has also conducted aerospace research at the NASA facilities in Huntsville. And this morning we'll also talk with Mary Kuipers and Amber Guy of the Mobile Public Library about their observations of this historic event 50 years ago. And when we come back after the break, a very special conversation as well from the Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville about the past and the future of America's space flight program. And welcome back to Perspectives as we celebrate the 50th anniversary of the moon landing. Earlier I spoke with Brian Odom, the historian with the Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville. And in this interview via satellite, Brian shared about the important role that Alabama has played in the United States space program. Good morning. Brian Odom joins us this morning, historian at the Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama. We thank you so much for taking some time this week. Brian, give us a feel what are things like this week and this month, of course, at the Marshall Space Flight Center there in Huntsville. What's the feel?
It's great. It's, the Apollo anniversary is generating a lot of energy, a lot of interest. The workforce here is engaged, obviously, looking back, the work they're doing now for the Space Launch System, thinking back to the work that happened in the 60s, in the very buildings that they work in. It's given a lot of people a lot of, something to think about. Out in the community in Huntsville, there's all these activities going on. There's, dancing in the street parties planned, astronaut visits locally. So there's a lot of activity, a lot of things to see, a lot of ways to interact with the program. There's going to be a Guinness World Record launch attempt out at the U.S. Space and Rocket Center, and really across the state. I mean, Alabama has had a huge participation in this program. I mean, they contributed a lot to the Apollo program, more than most people realize probably, with, the Saturn V vehicle that put man on the moon was actually, built, designed, developed right here in Alabama.
That's a good point to break in there, because I know that you're a historian at heart and that history is one of the things that you really love. Let's share a little bit about that, because you're right, a lot of people do not know the importance of the Marshall Space Flight Center there. Let's talk about, we went back a few years before that, and there was the Von Braun rocket team prior to the Marshall Space Flight Center, but they first were sent to Fort Bliss in Texas, then finally, of course, to Huntsville. How did that take place?
Yeah, World War II had ended, and there had been everything around here had kind of dialed back, and with the work that had happened here at Redstone Arsenal during that war effort had gone away, and they were looking for the next big challenge, the next big investment, and it turned out there were these rocket scientists out in the desert who were available, and they brought with them this engineering heritage that they had, and began work in 1950 for the Redstone, on what became the Redstone rocket, which eventually became basically the foundation of launching America's first satellite, Explorer 1, and America's first man in orbit, a man in space, Alan Shepard, in 1961. So that work, that group was incredibly important to that, and their presence here in Huntsville has really transformed this area to what is today the Rocket City.
It is said that the president was excited about that first launching of Alan Shepard into space in '61, and with that, he then presented that new challenge to NASA, of course, a major one, to the Marshall Space Flight Center. Only 8 years later, you were able to be a part of that. How critical was the Marshall Space Flight Center in making that happen, as you've shared a little bit already?
Yeah, well, the work that happened here was incredibly important. If the work here doesn't go on, if that development of that huge, powerful Saturn V rocket, if that's not accomplished, then we never leave the ground. I mean, it was incredibly important. It took a long time. When Kennedy first made set his goal for the end of the decade to land human beings on the moon and return them safely to Earth, that seemed to be a long way away, but the people here were already working on these incredibly powerful rockets. And, Marshall continues to be a propulsion center today. I mean, the work that was done back then, we still stand on the shoulders of those giants today with the development of today's Space Launch System, America's next big deep space exploration vehicle that's going to take us back to the moon in 2024. So it's not, Apollo is a time to celebrate and reflect on this important work that happens in the state of Alabama, but also the work that continues today.
Very important. And when you talked briefly there about some of the things that happened leading up to the moon landings, you also were a part of the lunar landing program, Skylab, Space Shuttle, and even the Space Telescope.
Exactly. Marshall's role here is a very diverse role. At the end of the Apollo program, they were looking to see what would be the next great challenge. Well, in 1973, they used some of that Saturn V hardware to launch what became Skylab, America's first laboratory in space. Then, immediate aftermath of the Apollo program, you have the development of the Space Shuttle. I mean, that work here continued. Marshall was responsible for all of the propulsion elements for that. Those Space Shuttle main engines, the solid rocket boosters, and of course the external tank. So, again, the advantages, the advances in science. Marshall, the Hubble Space Telescope. Marshall was the engineering center for that great facility that's turned in, just world-class science for over the last few decades. The Chandra X-ray Observatory, kind of rewriting the books on X-ray astronomy. Even today, we have people here at Marshall working on, the next big X-ray astronomy project. We have people working on, heliophysics. We have people working on gravitational waves. So all of the big major advances in the scientific community. A lot of Marshall work actually goes into that. But again, we continue to be the propulsion center for NASA and make those valuable contributions. And without the infrastructure provided by a very talented workforce across the state of Alabama and across the country, none of that would be possible.
Brian Odom, historian at the Marshall Space Flight Center, we thank you so much for sharing today and being a part of this incredible 50-year landmark that's happening, and of course letting us know how important Alabama has been in the beginnings of the whole NASA program, and of course that role continues today, and we look forward to what's going to be happening in the next 3 and 4 years as we head towards that 2024 mark. We thank you again for joining us today. And again, we want to thank Brian Odom and the other NASA officials in Huntsville for being on the program this morning and making this happen. But coming up next, Dr. Carlos Montalvo of the University of South Alabama, as Perspectives honors the 50th anniversary of man's landing on the moon. And welcome back to Perspectives. We now welcome Dr. Carlos Montalvo of the University of South Alabama. He's an assistant professor of mechanical engineering at South and also the director of the South Aerospace Systems and Technology Lab. And of course, he has also conducted aerospace research in Huntsville at the Marshall Space Flight Center. We thank you for joining us this morning.
Happy to be here.
A lot of great things are happening at South, but before we talk about that, let's talk about your time at the Marshall Space Flight Center and how that has impacted you.
Yeah, so an email came out, I think spring 2017, and they were starting up this, summer faculty fellowship program that was, old, and it got canceled, and then they started it up again. And the application was fairly simple, and I had a pretty good background with rocketry, working with the Army Research Lab. And so I applied, and sure enough, I got a phone call a month or two later, and they were working on some in-space tether research. And I had written a publication on some Navy tether work with parafoils and tethers. And they said, hey, do you think you can work on tethers in space? And to me, as a dynamicist, it's all the same.
Right.
So I just said, yeah, sure. You're not going to say no to NASA.
Exactly.
So I went ahead and headed over there, 10 weeks, packed up my wife and kids, and we headed off to Huntsville for 10 weeks. And I did a lot of work there on the electric sail program. The following year, I wanted to go back. I love Huntsville. It's a great area, and it was an opportunity to do more research. And I called up my PI, or program manager, the PM, and I said, hey, do you got any work for me? And he said, well, there's some work on some Mars sample return missions. Would you like to work on that? And I said, of course.
Sign me up, right?
You're not going to say no to NASA. And so I went there again last summer. And brought the work back here. And so now I've got 2 grad students and 4 undergrads working on a lot of multi-tiered aerospace research.
Well, give us an idea how that has transferred, because you've got some exciting stuff going on there at South Alabama.
Yeah, so we started the facility for it was actually aircraft systems and technology in the beginning.
What year was that?
That was in 2015, because my PhD was on fixed-wing aircraft. And then, I've actually never taken a class in orbital mechanics, believe it or not. And so I actually, bought a book when I went to NASA. Again, you're not going to say no to NASA. I bought a book and taught myself celestial mechanics.
Oh, that's awesome.
And then, so then when that research came here, the electric sail research and all of the controllability and mechanics behind that, and then the Mars sample return mission as well, when that all came to South, and I had grad students getting funded under those projects, and I had publications coming out on that, I kind of said, hey, I think it's time to change the name. So we changed the name to Aerospace Systems, because we do everything from satellites to ground vehicles to fixed-wing aircraft.
When you think about the Marshall Space Flight Center being that close and in-state, what benefit is that for the students at South? I'm sure it's a major one.
Well, you think about the numbers. I would say more than half of my graduate students are now working in Huntsville, and I've got one who's about to graduate in December who wants to go to Huntsville. Most of the students who graduate from my lab, they end up, if they stay local, they're at Airbus or Defense and Space or some local aerospace company here, or if they're looking for something else, I say just go call Research Park. I know a handful of people up there, and I just say, hey, one of my students is coming up to Huntsville, let me know. And it's a real quick drive to get there. And then so we have a lot of conferences and things, and we have a lot of communication between them. The AOAA organization in Huntsville, we actually started a local student and professional chapter, which I'm also the head of those as well.
So a lot of benefits with it being here in the state. What's the excitement level of the students when they know that at South they can participate in something that can lead to employment at NASA?
Yeah, so when I started here at South, there was no I would say no. There was little aerospace activity, and since I've gotten here, we have an AOAA organization. We have Design Build Fly, which design, build, and flies airplanes. We have the USLI team, which launches rockets. We're building a CubeSat that's going to be launching in August 2020, and we have about 20 members in each one of those organizations, which didn't exist 5 years ago. And so, everything is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And so, the numbers are what kind of show you what's going on. We have, only 450 students in the mechanical engineering program, but about 50 or 60 of those are interested in aerospace research and projects. And we have meetings weekly, even over the summer, and students are there and they're excited to be there. Some of them are not even getting paid, and they're just there. It's just because they want to be a part of it.
You in your information, it's called the FAST Lab.
That's right.
And so you also talk about how fast technology is moving and changing. So in hearing what you're sharing, it really is.
You have to adapt to survive, right? The whole point of the FAST was kind of like, maybe we can prototype vehicles very quickly. So we have 3D printers and foam cutters and soldering irons and everything we can to just, build a drone or build a fixed-wing aircraft as quickly as possible. Satellites take a lot longer, but you know, if I needed to put an airplane in the air, like I could get it up and running in a week or two. You know, so that's the whole point, like rapid prototyping, you know, getting everything together. And I've got students who are excited to do that.
It sounds very exciting. In concluding, where do you see the program heading the next 1 to 3 years?
So in the interim, the Alabama Space Grant Consortium is actually putting together, or they already have put together, a team across Alabama. So just like Brian Odom was talking about, how all of Alabama was really crucial in the Saturn V program, we're trying to create a intercollegiate group where we can create small sats very quickly. And so we have folks from Auburn, Tuscaloosa, Birmingham, Huntsville, and then Mobile as well. I'm the guidance, navigation, and controls lead for that program. And we're trying to put together a gamma ray burst detector satellite to be launched hopefully on EM2, which I guess will be like 2026, which is a long way away, but you know, we're building all that together. So in the first year or two, I mean, you know, we're looking at launching a satellite, first time ever, from South Alabama. And right now we have a track at South Alabama to create, so that students can take electives in aerospace engineering. And we're hoping to move that to a minor or even a major, you know, after, you said 1 to 3 years. That's
Right,
5, 10 years, but that's obviously where we're headed.
Right, you've got to build that momentum to get there.
You know, you got to, you know, crawl before you can walk, right?
Dr. Montalvo, we thank you so much for joining us today and reflecting as well as sharing how right here in the Gulf Coast region, South Alabama is a major part of the future of the NASA space program. Thank you so much, and of course, much success to you and your students.
Thanks, no problem.
All right, well, when we come back, a special look at NASA's plans to return men to the moon and women. And we also welcome Mary Kuipers as well as Amber Guile of the Mobile Public Library when Perspectives continues. Welcome back to Perspectives. And the Apollo lunar missions ended in 1972. However, they established a permanent moon base for future space exploration, and that has never been forgotten. We'll see what NASA has in store for us in the next 10 years. A lot of exciting things happening in America's space program. Of course, returning to the moon in 2024, part of that's America's next goal. And joining us now, Mary Kuipers and Amber Guile, the Mobile Public Library. And of course, the library has had several programs on the moon landing in the month of July. And I guess one of the things too for the kids now who are interested in being a part of Dr. Montalvo's program and then eventually at NASA, they can start learning at the library.
Exactly, and this whole show has gotten me so excited and pumped up. I know it's that way for everybody out there. But yes, the library is a wonderful place to start, and right now we actually have a very special photography exhibit that also includes Life magazines from July 4th through August 8th of 1969. And you can actually look through them and really get a sense for what was going on during that time leading up to the landing.
Some beautiful photography,
right.
I'm sure.
And I was thinking too that 50 years ago this morning, people were looking at their paper for the very first time and seeing actual pictures that were taken from the moon. So it's such an exciting
time in our country, really, and really the world, because the world was a part of this thing as far as the excitement that had been created. And of course, the you also have a special guest coming in this month.
We are super excited. Gary Willis, who is a colleague of Mr. Odom, who was on earlier, is coming down from Marshall Space Flight Center, and he's going to be at the main library as part of our summer reading program finale. So that's Saturday, July 27th at 10:30. And he's going to be talking about not just the Apollo program, but the future of NASA. A lot of what we've seen today,
Yes.
he'll be able to answer questions on that.
A lot of exciting things happen. How did you all decide to have this at the library to tie into the 50th anniversary?
Well, I think we knew from the Great American Eclipse in August 2017 that there was a lot of public interest in this. So any opportunity to sort of tie into that. But we have a lot of staff who we were very excited to find out about. This is an opportunity to show off some of what we have and to get kids interested. Everybody, but starting with the children, because they're going to grow up and become our future NASA scientists.
Yes.
They're going to take us to the moon. So we have 3D printers. So we 3D printed some little mini astronauts to give to the kids. They glow in the dark. So we did some craft. We're doing some crafts and things on. Libraries are very big on the STEM, science, technology, engineering,
Yes.
art, math. So we want to encourage that in our kids. And so we've done some programs where you do a little moon craft, where you can do some painting, and when you're done, it looks like the moon. And we wanted to show them, okay, now when you return, we want a soft landing, from the moon. So how do you arrange that? So we had little parachutes, and we're showing them how to do a little payload drop, and trying to teach them science and to understand and to take that forward and take that excitement with them.
And hands-on.
Yes.
I
yes.
really like that part.
Yes.
'Cause that's in fact, one of the things that Dr. Montalvo encourages the students is to work on their own and be responsible for learning. And so you are encouraging the kids to prepare for his future classes.
Exactly.
So when you talk about the things that are being made, like the things from the 3D printer, that is definitely state-of-the-art technology today.
Yes, the library actually has 4. We have 4 3D printers, Prusa i3 Make 3s, a couple of them with some multimedia upgrades, and that's something that the public can ask, can I 3D print this? Yes, you can. Go ahead and email us, go ahead through our website, you'll find the place to do that. And we've done that for all kinds of things. We have some folks who want maybe their costume accessories, or they want little toys or things like that. But we've done prototypes for businessmen who want to know, will this invention work? The only way really to know that is to create it in real life. So we've 3D printed it for them. So, and that's available for all of our patrons, adults and children. So
Exciting times
Yes.
at the library as you continue to be a part of the learning process, where we can go and put our hands on things as well as learn more about today's technology. And again, remind us of that date.
It's Saturday, July 27th, so next Saturday, 10:30 at the Ben Main Library on Government Street.
All right, well, ladies, we thank you all so much for joining us today, but also for the library being a part of this incredible celebration of their historic time in our nation and really around the world as we celebrate man's first landing on the moon. Thank you very much, Mary Kuiper, and of course, Amber Guy. And we want to thank as well our friends from the Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, and of course, Dr. Carlos Montalvo from South Alabama University for joining us today to talk about not only the anniversary of the moon landing, but as the ladies and Dr. Montalvo mentioned, the future of America's space program. Now join us here next Sunday morning at 7:30 for Perspectives as we discuss important issues and seek solutions. Now, if you have any ideas of topics that you'd like for us to address, just drop it to us at perspectives@fox10tv.com. I'm Eric Reynolds. Have a great week.